Hello, everybody, and welcome into Senior Living Live. My name is Melissa. Thank you so much for being with us here today. Well, we are discussing how you, as a caregiver, we believe most of the audience is here today, for a senior loved one can decide when it's the right time to consider assisted living and how you can make that transition as seamless as possible. We hope the tips provided by our guest presenter, Nancy Kriseman, today will help you and your family make what is always a very big decision in anyone's life. And Nancy will be here, of course, to answer all of your questions at the end of her presentation about maybe the next steps for your senior loved one. Now, to join our conversation and to ask any question you may have to Nancy, it's pretty simple. Just scroll down to the bottom of your screen where it says Q&A. Feel free to type your questions out there at any point in time during the webinar, and I will be happy to read those to Nancy at the end of her presentation. And just so you know, we expect that the webinar will last about an hour. Nancy, thank you so much once again for being a guest on Senior Living Live. I know this is your first webinar. We are very excited to hear your tips and all of your information here today. Thank you so much for being with us, and the webinar is all yours.
Great. Thank you so very much for inviting me. I wanted just to briefly mention a little bit about my background. So believe it or not, I've been involved in the senior care arena, if you want to say, for 40 years. And which now says that I'm kind of a senior. Yes, I am. I'm 67. And I have absolutely loved working with older people and their families, and really spent a good majority of my time in my career really working with the family caregivers. And I've kind of framed caregiver as care partner. And I'll talk more about that. And this particular session today is something that over the years in my private practice, I saw a lot of families struggle with, knowing that it would be better for their family member to be in a safe environment, like an assisted living or a memory care, but are really struggling with the elder not wanting to move, or perhaps the spouse, or different sorts of things that come up between the sibling, the adult children. So we'll be talking about all that today. So I'm going to go to my first slide. And I always say this to families, the art of being wise is to know what to overlook. It's like there are so many different things that can be overwhelming to the elder. And so as we go through this today, I'm going to kind of give you some ideas on what to overlook so that you really just get to the nitty-gritty of what you need to say and perhaps do to get the person that you care about into a safe, good environment. So there's a lot of reasons that elders resist moving. A lot of it is because many of the older adults, particularly those that are in the what I call the old 85 plus category, lived in their home most of their lives, and they don't want to leave their home. And it's hard at that stage in life, anywhere from, I would say, 75 and up in particular, it's hard to make a change. We all want to be in control, and we want to be independent, and we have the fear of the unknown. And one of the talking points when I'm actually working with a family and the elder is to say that you can oftentimes be more independent living in an assisted living where you're getting some support than having to be in your own home by yourself. Oftentimes, just the idea of moving is so overwhelming for people. The thought of, what am I going to take? How am I going to get rid of all this stuff? I don't want to get rid of all this stuff. This is some of the reasons that elders often don't want to move. Some are introverted, and they don't want to live with so many people, and they don't understand that you can set the apartment up to, so that they can be cozy in there and do what they want and come out for meals and maybe just stay in there. But we hope that doesn't happen. Or they may be ashamed or embarrassed that they can't take care of themselves, and they don't want to see themselves as not being independent. And a lot of time they're just in denial. They don't want to realize that they're having some issues. The adult children and the other family members, they don't know how to bring the conversation up about moving. And they often feel really guilty that, how can I move my family member who doesn't want to move, has been living in their home, say 30, 40, 50 years, because this is a generation that did not move a lot. And so I talk about how guilt is an important emotion, but you have to learn how to release it and let it go. And then the other one that comes up a lot is worry, because they worry that their loved one won't be taken care of properly or lovingly. And again, what I say to families is that you want to become a partner in care so that you can help the people that are caring for your loved one care for them properly and lovingly. And you can do some of that as well. And then again, family members can be in denial. And I worked with a family where there were 7 adult children, and at least 2 of them absolutely did not want their parent to move, and the rest did. And because the 2 that didn't want them moving thought their family member was still able to take care of themselves. And so we had to work through some of that. Many of you may know your musician Bob Dylan. How many times can a man turn his head and just pretend that he doesn't see? And I think I've seen that a lot with my families. They know that the person needs help, but it just feels like such a big endeavor to take on. So one of the things that I try to do and have done in my private practice, and what you can do when you go visit these places, is you got to start thinking, as much as you don't want to, about planning. Because if you make a decision in a crisis, your family member is going to be more emotional and vulnerable, and so will you. And it can be very costly because you end up maybe placing somebody somewhere where really it might not be the best fit. So the best choices are not available without careful planning. And, people will ask me, well, when should I start thinking about this? And, my mother's still independent. She's still making, cooking for herself. She's driving her car. She's 80 years old. And I say to people, right now, then and there, you need to start planning. You don't want to wait until something happens. And there's a lot of different communities out there and a lot of services, and they all kind of look alike. And so planning ahead helps to maximize, and that's a really important thing to think about, opportunity and support for your loved one and for yourself. Another thing that pops up a lot is that the well spouse is unwilling to let go of their spouse, till death do us part. This is again a generation of people, and I would say middle old, which is from 75 to 85, and old, which is 85 plus. Those are the folks that really struggle and feel like this is not right. I should be able to take care of my spouse. This is what's expected of me. Often there's resistance because of family conflict, concerns about finances, and also concerns that, and this is a big one too, that their loved one will decline more quickly. And I hear this a lot when people go and look at some of the memory care communities. They see a fair amount of people in there who are in wheelchairs, who seem to not have as much cognitive ability. And they're afraid if their family member may not be as declined, so to speak, as the folks in there, that their family member is going to also get to a quicker decline. And I have actually not seen that happen. Most of the time, it does not happen. And, I think the biggest challenge that people have around all this is the guilt. And I love this. Holding onto guilt can hold you hostage, and it can sabotage your decisions. Often families don't make a decision because they're afraid they're not going to make what they think is the right decision. And what I tell families is if you get to a place of right and wrong, then you're going to get stuck. And it is going to, guilt will sabotage you and hold you hostage. What you want to get to is a place of making the best possible decision based on the information you have at the time you're making the decision. So I want to let you know that feelings of guilt, uncertainty are normal. It's absolutely normal to feel these ways. And where you want to get to, like I said, is that best decision, not the right decision. You know, if you think you're making a right decision and then it turns out that it's maybe the wrong decision, then you're going to be so upset with yourself and you're going to need to be in an assisted living because you're going to get so depressed. I mean, the point is, and not that I shouldn't have said it that way. The very bottom line is that you're doing the best you can. And I want you to stay away from that right or wrong. And I think another thing too is that if you can connect with other family members who have also struggled with this and have made the decision to move somebody, into an assisted living, that might help you as well. And I know that oftentimes if you go in and take a look at a place, the Arbor Company certainly has done this. They will set you up with a couple of families that have, maybe had some struggle around this. They're not going to just send you to the people who did really well with the transition. They're going to send you to people who have kind of struggled with it themselves and what they've done to try to help themselves. And I think another thing that elders often feel, and I think the families feel too, is that if you have to move somebody into a senior living community like an Arbor, either for memory care or assisted living, it kind of emphasizes impending loss. And the thing is, we as humans are always going to experience loss. And one of the things that as we get older, I think what I've done with my own self is I've recognized that there are many losses that I have had to learn to overcome and deal with and acknowledge. And lots of times older people, if you interview them, they've had so many losses in their life. They're pretty good at dealing with it. Much more, I think, sometimes than some of us people who are a bit younger. There will be waves of sadness because what they're experiencing and you're experiencing is what we call anticipatory grieving. I mean, there is grief involved in leaving a home. There's grief involved in having to give up a car. There's grief involved in seeing your family declining or losing more physical or cognitive capacity. And grief is part of human experience. And we all have to learn to figure out how to cope with it, and then I think that sometimes if families don't acknowledge and stay more in denial, I found that it only adds more stress and worry to them and makes it even harder for them to make a decision. So one of the things that we talk a lot about is, what are some of the reasons that you would move somebody into a assisted living or memory care or even independent retirement community? And one of the questions I like for families to focus on is, and I use the word able. I've actually thought about this a lot. And I think about, is the person more able, less able, or unable to take care of their activities of daily living? Bathing, dressing, grooming, fixing their meals, that sort of thing, driving. It's pretty scary to think about because you are having a trouble saying no to letting somebody drive and you're letting them drive and they have cognitive impairment and God forbid they hurt somebody or kill somebody for that matter. Another health concern to be aware of in terms of self-care is, can the elder remember to take their medications? and reorder them when needed. And there are some wonderful tools now that are available that you can purchase to remind people to take their medications. When somebody has dementia, even with those types of tools, it can be confusing to them, and they may end up taking the wrong stuff or still forgetting to take their medications. And that can really put them at risk. It is at a really high healthcare risk. And then, can the elder take care of their medical appointments? Very often, that is something they forget to do, or they forget they made the appointment and they've forgotten that they've made the appointment. One of the biggest health concerns the families are struggling with is dealing with dementia. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about dementia, because there are lots of different types of dementias. Alzheimer's disease is actually, the primary one. About 50% of folks will have an Alzheimer's type dementia. So dementia is persistent short-term memory loss, which many of us have. The difference is persistent. So you can go to a parking lot, park your car, say at Publix, and then you come out after you've grocery shopped and like, okay, where's my car? But you find it. You have enough cognitive ability to realize that you might have not remembered exactly where your car is, but you're able to find it. So that's very different from having persistent short-term memory loss, where you don't even remember you parked your car, where you can't figure out how to find your car. You might repeat the same questions and information over and over again. Difficulty learning new things, especially things that you were used to doing before. This is, to me, something I really pay attention to when families are talking with me about whether they think their family member has dementia. Because, unfortunately, a lot of people think that because you're 70 or 80, you're automatically going to have problems with your memory. Yes, our memory slows down some, but these things are really different, the things I'm talking about right now. Confusion, getting lost while driving, or remembering to pay bills. Those are absolutely examples of issues with beginning to have some significant dementia. And like I said, these overlearned tasks, like knowing how to use a remote, knowing how to make a meal, follow directions, all those kinds of things are related to having some more significant cognitive issues. And then another biggie is paranoia or delusional behavior, where they might lose their purse, let's say, as example, and then they're blaming it on everybody else and saying, "Oh, you took my purse," or not realizing that they're the ones that lost it, and trying to find a way to blame others. Another important thing for families to pay attention to are safety concerns. How safe is the elder's home? Is it handicap accessible? Is it easy for somebody to knock on the door? And nowadays, you got to be so careful. I mean, I know that from my own self. There are people selling pine straw, and trying to convince you to buy $1,000 worth of it. And, so how do we know if the elder's home is safe for them? Is the refrigerator, getting inside the home? Is the home safe inside? Are they throwing out spoiled food, or are they just leaving it in and eating it? Would they let a stranger into their home? Is their neighborhood safe? Is the elder safe to drive? And, these are things I brought up before, but I really think that the two biggies for families is telling the elder they can no longer drive their car, and because it's not safe for them, and how safe their home is, and is the neighborhood safe. Those are all things that families have to really think about, and we can talk a little bit more about how you handle these when they start to resist these things and say, well, there's nothing wrong with my home, and I am safe to drive. I've been driving for 40 years. I know how to drive. Well, that's fine, 20, 30, 40 years ago, but now with your dementia, it's a whole different deal. So what we want to get to is making the best possible choice. And I like to call them loving choices. Because really you're doing this because you care about the person and you want them to be safe. And so we have to think about making that decision that way and recognizing that, yes, we are going to have a lot of different emotions that come with this. Um, there's going to be anger, both from the side of the person and for yourself. Feeling angry that you have to do this, even though you don't want to admit it, but it's a big responsibility. There's a great deal of sadness, as I said, there's grief around this. There's worry, guilt, and denial. And allowing yourself to acknowledge these different emotions and saying to yourself, easier said than done, I know, but if you don't at least get in touch with them and acknowledge them, then you end up holding them inside of yourself. And then what happens is you become impatient and you may say things that you wish you hadn't said to your family member. And so being able to say to somebody, Mom, this makes me feel sad about the thought of you having to move. Or, I'm going to put my dog over here. Or, I feel worried a little bit. I feel guilty. I mean, just being able to express some of that can really make a huge difference because sometimes the elder doesn't feel like you care. They think, oh, you're making this decision, and they don't realize how excruciating difficult it is for you too. So, and then the next thing, once you kind of acknowledge these emotions, and we talk about this, I do a lot of work with families around grief issues when there's been a death. And I say to them that when you acknowledge these things, then you can get to that place of being able to move into a different space so you can make better decisions, and more wiser and loving decisions. So, and it also means that sometimes you need help. Sometimes you just can't make this decision by yourself. And that's where it can be helpful, to talk with various people who have done this before and what did they find that was, helpful to them. Because I can tell you from my own experience, my mother had, we think, Alzheimer's disease. We're not 100% sure, but she clearly had dementia and she lived with it for almost 15, 16 years. Okay. It's a long time. And I really wanted to get to a place with my mom after I moved her into assisted living. Then I ultimately had to move her into a nursing home. Each time I made those decisions and looked at it from a more loving place, I was able to feel better. And honestly, it really did make me feel less stressed out because I knew she was in a place where she would be taken care of, especially if I couldn't get to her, if there was some kind of a weather issue. And that can be true, particularly for people that live in Florida or live, in places, where there could be tornadoes and hurricanes here too, and snow and etc. So people will then ask me, well, Nancy, what is the difference? What is assisted living? How is it different from, maybe bringing somebody just into the house? And so what assisted living does, it provides support when an elder needs help with his or her activities of daily living. And we talked about what those, are. It's an environment, and this is a point that I really want people to emphasize. The elder has a chance to live in their own apartment and to maintain as much independence as possible. They don't want to admit it, but many of them, their homes are just way too big for them. They aren't able to take care of them. And then what ends up happening is the adult children do. And then it puts a lot of stress on adult children who many are still working and, caring perhaps for their own children. And the other thing too is that you can hire people to come into a home, but it's expensive, number one. In fact, it's way more expensive than particularly if you have to do 24/7 care. But it doesn't always mean that the caregiver is going to be available when you need them with the amount of time that you'd like to have them there. And what if their car breaks down and they can't get there? So there's a lot of things that play into why you may really opt for more of an assisted living environment. And so these are the ones that I think are the main issues that I want families to really focus on and think about. What are the medical issues? What kind of, do they have diabetes? Do they have Parkinson's? Do they have dementia, Alzheimer's? Have they had a stroke? Do they have heart conditions? The emotional challenges, recognizing that perhaps, believe it or not, being in their home, they're not getting the socialization, as you see, I have is another bullet point. They don't realize how lonely they may be and how alone they often may feel. And this is something that families struggle with too, because you can't be there all the time in their house. And whereas when they're in assisted living, they have activities and programs and people coming in, and it's a much more of an alive environment. Um, Another thing is that they have more loss as they get older and need more care. Let's just face whether we want to agree with it. I always think of the book Tuesdays with Maury. And I think about how Maury to keep on adjusting as he started to lose more and more capacity of physical and even emotional and spiritual at times. And then the other thing is that the caregiver, or I call care partner, caring for that elder is just overwhelmed and stressed out, and also feeling emotionally exhausted. Um, and, I came up with a word that families kind of identify with. Sometimes what happens is not only do you feel burned out, but before you feel burned out, you may feel numbed out, meaning that you are so exhausted, you don't even realize how burned out you really are. You're numb. And that makes it even harder for you to make a decision. So I always talk about the heart remembers. And in the first book that I ever wrote back in 2005, it was called The Caring Spirit Approach to Elder Care. And one of the things that I always wanted to remind the care staff, to remind department heads, to remind, family caregivers, is that no matter how much people lose capacity cognitively, their heart still remembers things. And that's an important thing to think about. How do we keep them engaged through their heart? And this is where memory care comes about. Because really, memory care, I think, is the warm fuzzy of the building. It's where people are definitely more impaired, both cognitively and physically, but it's also a place where people have the opportunity to be around caring folks who really want to care for their hearts, because they recognize that their emotions, that their cognition is impaired. But when you connect to the heart of the person, they still feel a sense of being alive and that they matter. So what memory care does is it helps people hold on to their sense of self as much as possible. It provides a structure to their day, a safe environment, so that they don't get into thinking that perhaps a chemical underneath the sink is olive oil or something like that. I've definitely seen where people get very confused about things that they used to know were safe for them and now are no longer safe for them. In a good memory care, they provide activities that are created to match the cognitive abilities of the elders that are living in that particular community. And the staff are trained specifically to work with people who have cognitive impairment. Memory care is really about helping ease people. And I remember this one client I was working with, and she was a librarian, and we had to move her into memory care. And she said to me, I'll never forget her words. She said, Nancy, I feel demoted. So she had been living in assisted living, and then she had to move into memory care because she was really needing a lot more support and help. She said she felt demoted. And what I realized we needed to do for her was to still have her do some library kinds of things. And so what we did is we had a staff member bring her upstairs into the assisted living, and she would go into the library there because the assisted living had a lot of books in the library, and she would, catalog all the different books, and and that made her feel good. And then, we would maybe we'd bring her back for her meals, and then she'd come back upstairs, and she'd, perhaps sit in there because she wasn't somebody that would be a safety risk and wander out of the building because she'd get confused. So there are ways to help people who have dementia feel like they still matter. And I had another client that she was a singer. And so she put on a program for those that were in memory care. And we even invited some of the folks from the assisted living to come down and listen to her sing. And it was absolutely beautiful. Um, so there's lots of, I think the more you as a family can tell people about your family member, then, and I actually partnered and brought music that my mother loved, and we'd listen to it in a CD. And I play it for a lot of the residents, and she really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed it. So transitioning the person into assisted living and into memory care is going to be probably one of the hardest things that you'll ever have to do for your elder family member. And I put this as the first two bullet points because this is what I hear all the time, which is that you cannot try to convince the elder that he or she needs to move. Because what that does is they just dig their heels more into the sand and say, I am not moving. You're going to have to take me out dead. I've heard many people, elders say that. They're going to resist more the more you try to convince them. So I want you to release that whole thing about trying to figure out and spending all this time, when you go to bed at night, or you wake up in the middle of the morning, how am I going to convince my mother? I've got to figure out something to tell her or tell him, the father, that this is the best thing for them. They have to move. And to realize that most likely the elder's not going to want them. And so and I do think it's important if you can take somebody to take a look at a place, one, you might need to bring along an elder's friend to go with you so you guys can sort of look at it together, or bring along a grandchild versus you as the adult child, because sometimes they'll accept things a little bit better, maybe even have a pastor or a chaplain or somebody from your place of worship if you belong somewhere, or somebody from that community that goes and visits with you, with your elder family member. And that can make a huge difference, just having lunch and just, sitting there and saying, Mom or Dad, I know this is not something you really want to do, but I just want you to have the opportunity to at least see, because I want you to make a wise decision. Not that they're going to really do that, but at least you give them that opportunity, because I think the word opportunity is so important. And when we're talking about somebody who is needing to be in memory care, that's a whole different situation. Because very often, when somebody has fairly significant dementia and they're needing to move into a memory care part of the building, they don't have what we call executive functioning. which in executive functioning is stuff we all take for granted. You know, it's reasoning, it's judgment, it's being able to not be impulsive, generally speaking, unless you've always been that way about making decisions. It's being able to figure out stuff. Often when somebody is needing memory care, that executive functioning ability is impaired now. And so trying to reason with them is even more impossible, really, because they don't have that ability to reason. Another thing I suggest when you are thinking of transitioning somebody into memory care and you found the place you really want them to be, is if at all possible to set up their apartment with the things from their home that bring them comfort. You know, particular chairs that they might have enjoyed, or small sofa or pictures, and really get that apartment set up. And oftentimes, in order to do that, if they're still living in their own home, you can bring things over ahead of time. If they're living in a small apartment or condo and they're moving into, say, from assisted living into memory care, generally what I would suggest you do is, if there's any way you can take them out for a couple of hours so that you can move all the stuff from their assisted living apartment into memory care, so that they're not, observing all that happening. Sometimes you have to do, excuse me, you have to talk about what we call therapeutic lying or compassionate deception. And this is really, really hard, meaning that sometimes you don't tell them that they're moving. I mean, you just bring them over there, they have lunch, and I know this sounds really bad and terrible, but you just have them stay there, and you have one of the staff at the Arbor community or wherever they're moving to be with your family member. But you have to remember there's a whole list of reasons you're wanting to move somebody into memory care. And it's really for safety, it's for socialization, it's for a lot of different things. They can't take care of their home anymore. They can't take care of their apartment. They're eating with their fingers now because they're unable to feed themselves like they used to. So we do have to do compassionate deception sometimes. And I also suggest that we try to move people in the morning or the early afternoon, because as we get older and older, the latter part of the day is more difficult. People can get sundowning and that sort of thing. And I think this is a misnomer. We think that once we move somebody in, we're paying a lot of money, they should take care of our family member. And what I have always said to myself when my mom moved from place to place, I want to be a partner with the staff. I want to get to know the staff. I'm going to ask them questions about them. I want them to feel good about what they're doing for my mom, for my family member. That is a way that they will feel more at ease taking care of your family member and feel better about doing it. And maybe consider visiting your family member when there's an activity, because this is particularly important for people when somebody has dementia. Because what families say to me is, I dread going and visiting my family member, especially when they have dementia. I don't know what to do with them. I don't know how to be with them. I don't know what to talk about because they're not able to remember anything. And so if there's an activity, when you get the activity calendar, then go and visit them. I was actually shocked because they used to not like to cook. Loved the cooking activities that they had where she was living, both in the assisted living and in the memory care and in the nursing home. And then find ways to celebrate with your loved one, with the staff and other residents. Every birthday, I would buy pizza for all the staff that were caring for my mom. On my mother's birthday, I would also bring a cake. I just did things that let the staff know that they matter to me and they matter to my mother. And I love this quote, and I often share it a lot. When spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. And this is what I mean when I say there is a lot more advantage, believe it or not, to moving somebody into an assisted living or a memory care community than bringing in caregivers into their home. Because when you have a lot of people caring for somebody, they have the opportunity, like one of my mother's, um, one of her favorite people was the director of activities in her nursing home when she moved into the nursing home. She'd walk around with Latanya's name tag around her neck. And she loved the chef who would come up and visit my mom and make special things for my mom. So it's pretty incredible what you'll be able to recognize in terms of the differences when you make that loving choice to move somebody. And what I'd like to do now, because I'm certain people, even with all the things I brought up, there are probably some questions that people might have. Um, and and by the way, I did write a book called The Mindful Caregiver: Finding Ease in the Caregiving Journey, and it might be something helpful to you all as well. But Melissa, you want to see if there were any particular questions or?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Put that in the chat earlier while you were talking. So
Okay.
again, if any of you have any questions for Nancy, we already have quite a few ready to go. This is a really good time to do it, guys. We've got uh, almost 20 minutes before the top of the hour, and we're going to go until the top of the hour. So make sure you get those in. This is a great time. As you have seen, Nancy, with the wonderful tips, wonderful information, and she's only going to continue that as she answers each of your questions here. And there are some good ones. So let's get to it and not waste any additional time. Let's start at the top. So Joy has this question: how often will the spouse slash caregiver move into assisted living with their spouse?
Wow, that's a really good question. And I think first of all, it's a really tough one for the spouse because if the spouse is a well spouse and really doesn't need to be in assisted living, then I often will say that there's a couple ways of transitioning somebody so that the well spouse doesn't have to move in. Couple things that you can do, because the answer really is if somebody doesn't really need to be in assisted living, then the well spouse really probably shouldn't move in. Um, However, there have been times in my practice of 40 years where a spouse has moved in with the person who needed, to be in assisted living with their spouse. What I suggest often is that maybe you spend the first 2 or 3 or 4 days, or even the first week, living with your spouse in the assisted living. And then as they start to ease more, and people will, another question I'm sure is going to come up, how long does it take for somebody to actually, accommodate and get used to being in an assisted living environment? And certainly it takes more than a week. It can take months, sometimes. But I think having that spouse there in the beginning and going to activities with them can really ease them more into it. So that's usually what I recommend, is that the well spouse not move in. But every situation is really different. And so much of it depends, if somebody's been married for 40 or 50 years, the spouse just struggles so much with that guilt, right? And worry. Or they feel like I'm um, how can I be a loving, caring person if I'm not going to move in? And what am I going to say? How am I going to visit when I'm getting ready to leave and my spouse is asking me why I'm leaving? You live here with me. Do you want me to answer that one?
Well, I will say this, just as an aside for Joy, the Arbor Company is presenting this webinar alongside with Nancy. And I will say that one thing that is interesting that not all senior living communities do, but the Arbor Company does do, many of the communities within the Arbor family are designed for what we call aging in place. So we actually start, if you want to, with independent living. And then in the same community, you can have an independent living arm, then you can have an assisted living arm, and then in the same building, you can have a memory care arm. And what I have seen in action from a delightful woman down in our Dallas community, she's very independent, lives in the independent living side of the community. Her husband needs additional care. He's struggling with dementia. So he's in the memory care segment, community of wing of the community. And so as she told me, it just works so beautifully because now she knows he's getting the care that he needs. She can be a better wife because it's not, the burden is no longer on her to provide the help that he needs that she cannot provide at this stage with his dementia. So as she said, it's made her a better wife. She can just go down the hall and visit him, come back, do her, read her books, tend to her garden, do anything that she wants to do. And her husband is safe and sound, and she knows where he's at all times. And he knows that she's there as well. So it just works out for them. But as Nancy said, everybody's different. So, you'll have to find what works for you, but that is certainly an option, Joy. So I hope
Yeah.
that helps.
Yeah, and I apologize because I was thinking more specifically of somebody having to move into an assisted living.
Sure.
But if a spouse has the opportunity to move into an independent community, that can be absolutely what you said is a great option.
Yeah, yeah. Joy, thanks for the question. Douglas wants to know, Nancy, if the slides will be available at the end of this session, and not everybody shares their slides. So I just,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely,
for you.
totally. I want you to have them.
Perfect, perfect. Then we'll make sure that we get those from Nancy. And since each of you RSVP'd for this webinar, we've got your email. You needed an email to do that. We'll make sure that those slides are with the link that we will send you tomorrow with this full webinar and Nancy's links. And I think that will be a nice dynamic duo combination together. So thanks, Douglas, for that. Caroline asks, my mother is moving into assisted living tomorrow. Congratulations, you've made that first step. She says she's comfortable and looking forward to more social interactions. She has stage 4 dementia, but she's reluctant to accept help with bathing and dressing from a stranger. And this is not uncommon. She lets me, but no one else. Nancy, how can she help her to accept this help from others, which is the whole purpose of moving into assisted living?
Yeah, I mean, I think um, it's that's the most intimate, one of the most intimate things is having somebody bathe you. And so again, the whole idea of somebody moving into an assisted living is to allow the caregivers to do that with you. What I usually suggest is that the caregiver needs to find a way to tell the elder, I'm just there as an assistant to help, if you need help, and really try to let that person do as much, cover them up. I mean, I've seen people where they actually have, a towel wrapped around them, and they slowly, they start at the bottom with their feet, because that's usually where people feel the most comfortable, and let the caregiver do that. And again, it may, because you don't really want the adult child to be the one doing that type of care. I mean, they've got to get used to, and it may be that it just takes a little bit of time. I mean, it's not, in the olden days, you're all not going to love this answer, but people probably only bathed once a week. I mean, they did what they called spit baths. And I'm not saying, I'm not recommending, I mean, you want the person to bathe regularly, certainly. But I think that the elders got to get comfortable with the caregiver and trust the caregiver, and they have to work together. And so any way that the caregiver, if we can use kind of the same caregiver that's going to be doing the bathing with the person, and tell the, that person, look, I want you to do as much for yourself as possible. We're going to keep you covered up, those kinds of things. Because there is, again, in many of the middle old and old, they feel ashamed, they feel embarrassed, that, they're used to doing it for themselves. Melissa, you may have an extra idea or two along with that.
I just think that what you said is perfect. I mean, as the case with your mother, Nancy, who loved a particular staff member,
Yes.
maybe it's finding a particular staff member that your
Yep.
mother, Caroline, is very comfortable with. You're there with that staff member in the beginning because your mother knows you, and if she trusts you. So if you trust this person, then I think that trust is sort of going to transfer to your mother at that point. So maybe it's a weaning process, perhaps, as Nancy was indicating, where you're there sort of in the initial stages and then sort of wean your time to where it's just the caregiver and your mother at that point. So,
I
uh,
thought of something. I thought of something else real quickly. My mother went through a period when her dementia got worse, where she did not want to take a bath. And what we did was, and this is going to sound a little crazy, but she loved Milky Way bars. And so the caregiver would come in and say, Doris, here's a Milky Way bar. Why don't you enjoy this? And it kind of distracted her enough that the caregiver could start, and wash her little by little. So, and we
yeah.
put music on too.
Yeah, really good tips here, Caroline. And again, congratulations for
Yeah.
getting that first step in. And it sounds like your mother is looking forward to, as you said, looking forward to it, and hopefully will thrive while she's there. I have no doubt. Thanks for the question. Brett has one as well. When should you start talking about actually, I'm sorry, let's move up. So Brett's question, my father has fairly severe dementia. His favorite activity is to go outside in our large forested yard and pick up sticks. In memory care, will he have an opportunity to be outdoors? I plan to take him to a park or other outdoor areas since he seems to enjoy it so much. Are there other options?
Well, generally speaking, almost all memory cares, all these communities have an outdoor area. And one of the things that I also would recommend is you can make what I call grab and go activity boxes, and you can bring a box of a whole bunch of different kind of sticks too. And so he can, or bring a box and he can collect sticks, bring them inside, he can organize them. You can talk about the different type of wood is on these sticks and bark. I mean, it's actually kind of interesting stuff. So absolutely though, I mean, I think being outdoors is so important. It really fills the spirit of people. And Arbor has done a great job of making sure that, well, I know it's not just Arbor, but a lot of these communities have, really do make sure that there's an outdoor area for people. And it's safe too for people.
Correct. And yes, not just Arbor, but many communities. I
Yeah.
mean, it's so important to get vitamin D, and they all say it,
Oh,
run
yeah.
your vitamins the natural way. That's the best way to get it. And, it never hurts anybody to be outside, especially we're in Atlanta, Georgia here, and it's beautiful
Yeah.
today. So thank you for that question. Another thing that, just to piggyback off of what you just said, Nancy, Brett, I think would be really cool, as Nancy said, to sort of pre-collect the sticks for him, and then maybe plant them out in places that he's going to stop by when he's outside. It may be the garden area that he really enjoys, and sort of plant some really nice, cool sticks. So maybe he likes the bigger ones, or maybe he likes the tall ones, and just sort of put them there and kind of place them there if you can, and just sort of plant them so that he finds them along the way and it makes him happy. So that's another good idea. But yes, absolutely, every senior living community will give your father an opportunity to go outside and to be outdoors for sure. So Kenyetta, when should you start talking about the importance of pre-planning so that all family members can be a part of the final wishes? I know that is something that is taboo to talk about, but it is important regarding the family's wishes before healthcare concerns come into play. And absolutely, I totally agree with this. So your thoughts on that, Nancy?
Yeah, I mean, my general feeling, again, everybody is a little tiny different. But I mean, I started doing that when I turned 60. Really seriously looking at who's going to be my power of attorney for healthcare and finances. Do I have, making sure that my financial planner is in place and that we're starting to talk about, those sorts of things. You don't want to wait, as I said before in one of my slides, until there's a crisis because you don't make a good decision. And I think it is an uncomfortable thing for us because in our culture, we're not so comfortable with talking about these kinds of questions, especially end of life kind of stuff. But the whole idea is that we want to say to the family, let's get together as a family and talk about how we can support each other so that we can all be as independent as possible. But when we need the care, we know what's available to us and how much it's going to cost. Because people don't even understand. They think Medicare is going to cover it for independent assisted living or whatever, and it doesn't, you know. And Medicaid's a whole nother thing, and you have to almost be impoverished in order to use Medicaid,
Right.
and it doesn't generally cover some of these places. So the earlier the better. I mean, people are not going to talk about it. I mean, if you can talk about it in your 50s, wonderful, but usually it starts at around 60.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple of questions from Blakely, but I want to tie in this other question from Anonymous because it goes to what you just answered. What are some recommendations on how to start the conversation with a loved one? So we talk about when do we start the conversation, like what age, and now it's how do we start the conversation? So let's tie those two questions together.
Well, what I've suggested, and this is a little tiny bit therapeutic line for some people, um, and that would be that you say, I was out to lunch with somebody, one of my friends or whatever, and she started talking to me about her parents and that they were starting to make some decisions. And it made me think, I wonder if maybe we should, as a family, start talking about it. So even if that didn't happen with you, you can do a little bit of compassionate deception and say, hey, I think, one of my friends was talking about it, or, I've even been thinking about it now. I'm in my 50s. And, because many of our parents are, you're 50 and they're 80, you know. And I've been thinking, I need to start doing that for myself. And, let's talk about this as a family. And maybe and you start with yourself, but you have your parent involved with you. So you're focusing kind of on yourself first, and then you move into talking about it with your 70 or 80-year-old, family member.
Right, right. I hope that helps. Blakely, we've got two questions here, and I think we answered one of them about spouses. Are they separated when they move in, and how does that work? We'll get to that just momentarily. First question from Blakely. Nancy mentioned independent living, assisted living, nursing home, memory care. It's a lot. How are these different in terms of residential space, whether it's apartments where a person resides, if it's a single room like a hotel or a hall of a facility? Can we quickly break that down, Nancy?
Well, I mean, Melissa, I know that in a lot of the communities that I've looked at that have what are called continuous care retirement communities, CCRCs, they have all these different, sections, right? They've got independent. They have not only independent in the, with an apartment independent, but they may even have cottages or separate homes. And then they have assisted living, and then they have memory care, and then they, may even have nursing home.
Mm-hmm.
And generally speaking, the more independent you are, if you're living, say, in a cottage or your own home on a campus, you're obviously going to have a much bigger space, right? And what you're ultimately doing is you're downsizing, downsizing, downsizing. And so, which is what some of our elders really struggle with when they've had a huge home that they are now having to say move into assisted living. They can't move into independent, but they need assisted living. And now they've got this 900 square foot or 1,000 square foot apartment. And they're like overwhelmed at how am I going to bring all this stuff, which of course they're not, So essentially, the answer to the question is it gets smaller and smaller. And there's a reason for that, though, because it makes it simpler. Memory care is smaller usually so that people don't get as confused and they can easily find their room that they're living in. You can get lost in your own house if you have dementia, if it's big enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's obviously not what we want. We want the
No,
space to be familiar and all the areas of the space that you're residing in to be familiar for somebody with dementia. But Blakely, I'm just going to say senior living has exploded over the
yeah,
last years. And so it's kind of hard to nail down exactly what
yes,
it is. You're going to have to go community to community because, as Nancy said, we've got cottages, solo sit-alone homes that are called
yeah,
cottages that are just standalone houses that are part of these
yeah,
residences. We have them. You have your rooms, like you mentioned, like a hotel room. It's more like an apartment. It's got everything you would need fully equipped, like a small apartment. Some of them are single occupancy. They can be dual occupancy,
right.
meaning spouses can live together. It's never going to be unless you want a roommate. Maybe your mother has a best friend and they're on the same level in terms of need and they want to live together. Okay. It is dealer's choice. It
Yeah,
is
it is.
whatever you desire, it is available. Everybody's thought of it. I can guarantee you that. What I can tell you to do, head over to www.arborcompany.com. Take a look. We may not even have a community in your area, but it gives you an idea of the options that senior living
Mhm.
is
Yeah, and
today.
can
It's
offer, right.
very
And
different
and
than 20 years
and,
ago, for sure.
we didn't even talk about buy-ins.
What
I
was
mean,
that?
some of the places you have to buy into,
Correct. Yeah. So it's
you
it's
know?
it's a smorgasbord.
It's just, yeah,
There are
it
so
really
many
is.
options these days that again, maybe 10 years ago, definitely 20 years ago, we didn't
Yep,
see anything like this. This did not exist. It was mostly nursing homes. And so
yep,
people get in their head when they're brought up thinking nursing homes, and that is
yep,
not what these places are these days. These are like five-star resorts. I've been there myself, and
yeah.
I'm planning myself at some point in my life to live in one of them. So just throwing that out there. It's wonderful.
And
Also,
and and, and
yes.
Melissa, it made me think of something real quick. And that is what sticks in older people's heads. They
Yes,
think it's a nursing home they're moving into because
it
that's all they knew. That's all they knew.
right, right. And it is not. I guarantee you
Yeah,
that. So please just peruse, look around. There are plenty of communities that you can look at and kind of get an
yeah,
idea of what's out there. So I hope that that answers that question. The other one was, and I think we touched on this, will spouses typically be separated when moving into a
yeah,
community under circumstances where one needs a caregiver and the other does not? I think we did touch on that. Again,
yeah,
smorgasbord of options, right, Nancy?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it really depends on if at the end of if the person can live in an independent section or have their own little home and the other person is in memory care, then they can still live under kind of the same roof in a way, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, we really have thought of everything. And if we haven't, we'll be implementing it tomorrow. I can guarantee you that. Okay, let's move to Margarita. What is the best way to drop off mom the first day at the memory care facility? I love this question. Some people
Oh,
recommend not to visit for a week so she gets used to it. It will kill me to leave her there and her being so lost there. She has dementia and will be totally lost.
okay. Oh, I mean, over the years, I have so struggled with this question. Mainly because I think it's very individual, and I do not feel like there's a right or wrong. There's a best answer to this based on a couple things. One, if you feel that it's going to kill you to leave your mom there alone, that's not good. Because you want to choose a place where you are going to feel relatively confident that she will be taken care of and will be loved upon. And I think over time you'll get more and more trust because what you're trying to get to is a place of trust. And when you walk into some of these communities, you can feel it. You can feel the love and the caring and that your mom will be cared, for and cared about because it's both those things that you want. The for is the ADLs, the about is taking care of her spirit and who she is as a person, right? So I I can't comfortably answer it. I don't love saying don't visit for a week or two until because it's going to take time to get adjusted. I don't think it's a good idea to spend all day there every day. I think if anything, the staff need to get to know the person without you there. So particularly with ADLs, when they need, bathing, dressing, grooming, and all that ultimately. But it's such an individual answer in a way. Um, so I would say to you that it is very important that the staff know that they are responsible for taking care of your family member, that you're not going to be coming over there and helping with the dressing and helping with the bathing and all that, because they've got to be able to do that. And they've got to build that relationship, right?
Yeah. And I would just say, trust the process.
Yeah.
The individuals that are, they make this a career. It's not just a job for them, especially in memory care. It's very, these are special people who do this, and
Yes.
they have seen everything. And so if that is the recommendation they are giving, I would say trust the process. And I will also say, as an aside, my grandmother was in the same situation, had dementia, in a memory care community, and walks in, everybody's, biting their nails. Is she going to be combative? What's going to happen? She thought she was in a spa and basically didn't even realize the family was there, just went off and enjoyed herself. And so that 5-day process of kind of getting her acclimated to her new surroundings was easy. And
Yeah.
again, as Nancy said, everybody's different. So I'm not going to guarantee or promise you that's the case, but you may be surprised. You
Yeah.
actually may be surprised, and trust the process. So we do have one final question here, and then we're going to wrap up for the day. This has been a great conversation. Margarita, I hope that answers your question. Brian wants to know, and this is also a great question, what are the recommendations for involving a transition to assisted living from an out-of-state move with a flight for my father with dementia? He does remember my house from his long-term memory and would be near my house. So we're talking about a big move here, Nancy.
Yeah. I had to do that with my mother. So I totally, I'll tell you, whew, what we did, and you're not, everybody's got to, again, do this a little differently. I felt like, because we had to put my mother on a plane. And sometimes you put the person on a plane, sometimes you drive them in a car. Um, I actually asked her doctor to prescribe some medication for my mom, some anxiety medication, something that would stay in her system for a while. So, like a Xanax or an Ativan will last only about 4 hours or so. I knew that my mother, and so I knew she never liked flying. I mean, she was terrified of flying. So can you imagine her dementia? And then on top of that, getting her on an airplane. So we actually, my brother and I literally put her in a wheelchair. She had the anxiety medicine, and we lifted her into the plane. And then I sat next to her and held her hand, and she really slept through the entire thing. So that was a really good thing. So a lot of it is going to depend on how you're going to transport the person and how uncomfortable, how long can they, last in, say, a car or on the plane. The other thing is my mother was not incontinent, but we did put a depend on her, a brief, an adult brief, just in case, because we knew we weren't going to be able to get her into the bathroom on the plane. And I didn't want her to, have an accident in just regular clothes. So those are the kinds of things. I mean, we're dealing with an adult, and we want them to have as much humanity and dignity as possible. At the same time, you know, um, they are moving into an environment that they're not, they haven't been in before. So we just want to, like I made some comments earlier on how to make the apartment feel as much like their place as possible and that sort of thing. I mean, Melissa, do you want to add some things? Because I know that, over the years you've had to deal with this as well.
I'm just going to add what one of our guests just added to the chat. It's Jennifer says, we paid for an Arbor nurse to fly with us up to Nashville,
ah,
accompany us in a couple of cars down to Atlanta, and it worked out wonderfully. So that also could be an option for you too,
yeah,
Brian. So again, reaching out and asking for help and then getting the
yep,
help that you need, so then you don't feel like you have to do it all. You may not be equipped. This is
yeah.
like all foreign to you and new. You can hand that off to somebody who is very much equipped to handle that situation. So,
Yeah, or even, even hiring a caregiver that is able to do that kind of thing, that would be willing to, to come with you, and then you fly the caregiver back. Again, a lot of these things we're talking about right now, you have to have the finances to be able to afford it, but most people, can or do have that. And again, an adult grandchild can sometimes be a lifesaver.
and Brian does add, and I think he's got enough help here. He says, thank you. My brother and sister will escort him on the plane. So it sounds like
Beautiful,
he's going to be well
beautiful.
covered, but the medication, asking your doctor for telling them exactly what's happening. We just need a little bit of help to get from point A to point B.
Yep,
That may be all that you need. So,
yep.
but it sounds like you've got a ton of support, which is absolutely awesome. And that has brought us to the end of our webinar. And we could talk about this all day. I
I
know we
know.
can do that. Um, um, First of all, Margarita did say, thank you so much. You guys were very helpful. And I agree. Just wonderful, wonderful stuff today, Nancy. I know there are so many people watching live, and those of you who will be watching this on the back end on demand, maybe at midnight, trying to find
Mm.
solutions to what is a very tough emotional scenario. And Nancy, I think you've been able to help everyone feel a little bit more confident moving forward with this difficult transition, knowing that they're doing everything that they can to help their loved one, and that sometimes just asking for help may actually
Yep,
be the very best option for your senior loved one. And so,
absolutely. And
Nancy,
we'll give out the handout so they can, look back at it all.
yes, absolutely. So we will have that handout as part of the link that you will receive to this webinar in your email that you use to RSVP for the webinar here today. Nancy, you're awesome. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so
Please
much.
come back.
It's amazing. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you. Now, if you are interested in finding out more information about this topic or other topics related to senior living, please head on over to our website, www.seniorlivinglive.com. All of our videos are available on demand when you want to watch them. And the best part, guys, they are all free. Thank you so much for being a part of Senior Living Live and our conversation today. Have a great day, everybody.